Hi, I'm Jill Griffin, the host of the Career Refresh podcast. In this episode, I'm introducing you to Brent Poer, Global Client Lead at Publicis Imagine. He joins me as we explore the journey of understanding your own unique value and harnessing your own superpowers to create success in your career and in your life. Brent was my boss for a few years and played a key role in my journey. He selected me to co-lead a division of Publicis, and this experience sharpened my business skills, my leadership skills, enabling me to lead teams globally, launch and scale a startup, and eventually move on to launching and running my own business successfully. Brent has a remarkable ability to recognize people's unique talents and build impactful teams. We used to joke and say he was the client whisperer because he understands people on an intuitive, empathic level, and he's really honed those skills over the years. And I'll tell you, as I said in the podcast, there is no faster way to build trust than for someone to see you, get you, and know how to serve you in a business sense. We discuss how often our own perception is influenced by others' opinions and the importance of finding clarity through introspection, especially in times of change, challenges, and failures. We go on to learn how he reads the room, connects meaningfully with others, and navigates the complexities of both his personal and professional life. Brent will share insights on how he clears his mind, how he finds peace in his daily routine, and most of all, how he stays adaptable in an ever-evolving marketplace. Brent is a wonderful storyteller and a delight. So lean back and listen in. Here's Brent. Brent, we are finally here doing this. I really thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
All right. So the question I ask everyone, as our listeners know, is take us way back and tell us, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
Oh God. This is a winding road. And part of it was the fact that I and it kind of formed some perceptions about myself, to be honest with you, that carried through a large part of my career, which is at the beginning, I was a drawing and painting major at the University of Georgia. I had no idea that I was going to work in advertising. I thought I was going to be a fine arts painter. In my mind, growing up as a kid in the South, I looked around and I knew that I was eventually going to be gay, and that I was probably going to have to leave the South. And I was going to move to New York, where the center of the art world was. I was going to live in Soho in a giant loft, and I was going to be like a famous artist.
Okay.
And no, in my mind, I was like, literally, I was like,
I love the conviction
I,
of it all.
I was going to be hanging out with Andy Warhol. I was going to be at Studio 54, and I was going to be painting during the day and then living, a glamorous life at night. And my sophomore year of college, my mom called me and said, "You need to come home." And I lived in Atlanta, and I got in my little Rabbit GTI and drove back to Atlanta. And my mom greeted me at the door, and she said, "This will take 5 minutes." And I was like, "Okay." And I walked in the door, and my mom and dad sat me down in the living room. And my dad really didn't say much. And my mom said, "We are not rich. You are not going to be Picasso. You need to go back to that school and figure out something that makes money, because we are not supporting you for the rest of your life." And I said, "Excuse me?" And she's like, "You heard me. You need to go back to that school and figure out something that makes money, because we're not going to support you for the rest of your life. And Brent, you're talented, but you're not that talented." And I hate to say it. And a lot of people have asked me, were your feelings hurt?
Hmm.
And actually, they weren't.
Tell me more.
I think in my heart, I knew that this was a wistful dream, but I hadn't thought about what was next.
Hmm.
And I had spent so long burying myself in the art room at this, school in Atlanta that, between sports and art, there wasn't much left, beyond that of like what my imagination was. And my parents are like, my mom, was a housewife and running some small businesses at that point in time. My dad was in real estate. I didn't know much about anything else outside of that, but I'd seen Bewitched and I knew what advertising was. And drove back to the University of Georgia. And it's like, I'm going to go, like, it seems creative. I'm creative. I'm going to go do that. And so the crazy thing is I was in Cannes, not to be like a name dropper, but the University of Georgia has a semester in Cannes now, and they certainly did not have it when I was there. And for their advertising students, and there was a teacher there, Karen, who asked me to speak to a bunch of students. And I said beforehand, I was like, I need to tell you something. She was like, what? I was like, I cheated to get into the school. And she's like, what? And I said, well, you had to take a typing test because it was the advertising school was part of the Grady journalism school. And so you had to
Copywriting,
type
typing.
60
Yeah.
words a minute, and I didn't know how to type. So I had a fraternity brother who looked sort of like me, who took my ID. I paid him $100. He passed the typing test, and I got in. And she's like, you know what? You're not the first person who's told me. We did away with the typing test. And I went into the school, and I would sit there and say it opened my mind up to this idea that you can be creative and you can be a business person, that you don't have to pivot between the two.
Right, right. And weaving the
And
storytelling almost of the two of those, especially if it's underpinning in journalism school, the advertising piece, it's going to bring the storytelling forward.
you've and for me, that's where it got interesting. I was like, oh my God, I can use both sides of my brain versus I need to be one-sided. And, I think the thing that has been the underpinning of like my career was another piece of advice that I had from a former boss, whose name is Rick Haskins, who was, we worked together and he was the CMO of Lifetime Television back in the early 2000s. And Rick told me at one point in time, he's like, you're a generalist. And he said, you're going to make a lot of people uncomfortable because
Mm.
you're a little good at everything. And he said, and people are going to want to put you in a box. And, I will sit there and say that he gave me a run at doing a lot of different things, which probably formed a lot of my opinions on, or formed a lot of things that had shaped some of my later career because I've done a lot of different things. And, you know, I found in different companies that, I've been a bit of a head scratcher at times because they're like, we don't know which box to put you in. And I'm like, don't put me in a box.
Mm.
And why confine me by labeling me of
So let
you're
me go deeper on that with you, Brent, because I think a lot of our listeners can understand that, meaning that they also are a generalist and they also maybe don't want to be in a box, or maybe they're really good at two things and they don't want to choose. How did you navigate that?
well, I was
Because the company is still going to want you to deliver on whatever the goal is. So how did you deliver? How did you navigate the box?
look, I think at the beginning it was incredibly confining. Um, you know, I I have dealt with people trying to put me into a single role by then wanting and asking to do other things and to switch kind of like what my focus is. And honestly, if you looked at my resume, you'd be like, I have no idea who this person is. It's all over the place. But part of it was I didn't want to get bored, and I was always afraid of being bored. So I was like, I want to go do this. I want to go do that. I mean, I got into I went from an advertising focus to working for Reebok with the woman who invented step aerobics because she met me and thought I was smart. And I was like, you're working at Reebok. Sure, I'll take a job. And went on a journey with her to launch step aerobics. Um, then met someone who said, you're pretty smart. Would you like a job? And jumped on that job. And it has been my thing to sit there and say, when someone opens a door and says, would you like to try this? I've always been someone who says, sure, I'll try that. And my husband says that I have something, and this is not a compliment, and I want to just put it out there. It's not a compliment. He says that I have blind confidence. I tend to believe that it's not blind confidence. I have something called faith.
Mm.
Bo says that blind confidence is I walk into scenarios and I'm like, oh, everything's gonna be fine. Yes, I am someone who says that things will be fine because I believe that we can always find some solution at the end of the day. However, I believe in myself enough that I've been able to take swings at things that I was probably not prepared for. But I know at the end of the day that I have enough of a survival instinct that I can figure it out.
Mm. So let's go deeper on that. I know that, for our listeners, Brent gave me a chance. I was working in digital. He was running the content division and needed more digital talent. And he said, come over here. So his idea of like, yeah, come over and try something new. And when someone opens your door, jump for it. And it was some of the most impactful professional parts of my career. And I owe a lot to Brent for that, my gift of storytelling being honed under his auspices. And when you think about the idea of, you're coming in saying you have blind confidence, or as Bo says blind confidence, you say faith. The understanding of your value, I think, is what's underpinning. And what I know is one of the philosophies of yours is that when you understand your unique value, that you can bring that to the table, that is what is going to pay off. So tell us more about how you tapped into that.
Here's the crazy thing. I don't think that I knew what my superpowers were until about 2017.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm going to
Again,
keep saying, tell us more. Tell us more.
I go back to the story of I started off as a painter and then it was creative. And I kept telling everyone I was creative. Like that was my superpower, my core superpower. I don't think that is my core superpower at all. I think, and I did not understand this. As much as I was fighting labels, I was also willing to accept a label called creative. Okay.
Okay.
I felt like that gave me the way to open a door. I'm creative. I can figure this out. I'm creative. I can do this. I am a creative person. I do not think that my creativity is what makes me unique. And, it took a lot of soul searching. And I had reached a point in my career that I had a decision. And, in 2016, there was, I work at Publicis Media, at Publicis, and there was the merger of Publicis Media and the agencies were all coming together. And I had been part of Starcom MediaVest Group, and I was very proud of like that because I thought that we were like the best. And, I was also leading a content division and I was like, I'm creative. And, we had been through kind of a tough period of time and the agency world can be very cyclical. And so, sometimes you're like number one and then you can turn around and then you just start losing accounts after one. And you see it happen to everybody. And like, honestly, my heart goes out to anyone who's at an agency that starts that cycle because it is hard to live through and it's hard to have the faith that you're going to come to the other side.
Until you see that, to your point, it's cyclical and it's like you're up,
It's like everybody's got
spiral
this,
up, you spiral down.
and we were on a downward cycle, and we'd lost a bunch of major accounts, and we'd been in a pitch, and I had retained a section of a piece of business that then was being transferred to a different agency and within Publicis because they were merging with another company. And I didn't know anyone at Zenith. And all of a sudden I was told that I was moving down to Zenith. And it's like, but no one asked me. And I have 30 people on my team that have been through a war zone of losing accounts. And we have banded together to hold a little family together. And they told me that we were all moving, and no one had asked us, and I resigned. I went home and I told Bo, my husband, and he was like, "You need to go back there and you need to get your job back." But the crazy thing is the day afterwards, I got a call from a guy whose name is Sean Reardon, who was then the CEO of Zenith. And he said, "Hi, it's Sean." I was like, "Hi." And he's like, "I'm the CEO of Zenith." I was like, "Sure." And he's like, "So I need to talk to you." I was like, I'm not sure we need to talk. I resigned." And he's like, "I know, but there's a problem. I need you and those 30 people to come down to help transition this business. And I've been told that if you don't come, no one's coming."
Mm.
And I was like, I don't know if my heart's in this anymore. Like I've just lived through losing some of the major businesses. It's like that I poured my heart into. And we talked for a little bit. And at the end of it, Sean said, "Brent, I know what it's like to have poured your heart into an account." And I said, "I'm not prepared to like you." And he said, "But you do." I said, "Don't be so fresh." Um, and so for 3 days, he called me and we would start talking and he was just trying to warm me up. And at the end of this, he said, "So what are we going to do?" And I said, "Look, this is going to be a little out of left field." I said, "But I want you to come up to our building in New York. I want you to talk to the team." And I said, "I want you to talk from your heart the way that you've been talking to me about what you want to do with Zenith." And I said, "And afterwards, we're going to vote. And if it's unanimous, we'll all come. And if it's not, you're going to have to, negotiate with us individually." He's like, "You can't do that." I was like, "But I can because I've resigned." And he came up and I helped him prepare and he came up and he talked to the team from his heart. And then I shoved him out the door and we closed the door. And he was like, and I was like, "I'll call you in 15 minutes. Just trust me. Trust me." And I sat down with the team. I was like, "What do you want to do?" I thought we needed wholesale change. We didn't need wholesale change. We just needed enough of a change for people to take a breath from what had happened.
Mm.
We had lost 4 major accounts. You had watched teams that you were super proud of being part of be disbanded and people leave the agency world, period, to
Mhm.
do other things. And these are your friends that you've worked with for 10 years, things like that. And you're thinking the entire time, "Oh my God, should I be getting out? Like, what am I doing here? Did I miss the rescue boat, the lifeboat off of the Titanic? Did I stay too long?" And I thought that we needed to just all let go. And this one kid who was brand new, his name was Dylan, he was an associate. He had just started like 4 months into his job, his first job. And he said, "You seem to trust him." And I was like, "I don't know why, but I do." And he said, "Well, we trust you. So if you trust him, why don't we just try this?" This is an associate. He's 23 years old. And I said, "So who wants to do this?" And everyone raised their hand.
Nice.
And I
Nice.
called him and I said, "We're all coming." What I
Amazing.
didn't know was the change of scenery and then change of environment was what I needed. And it needed for me to clear my head of the past.
Mm.
I needed to be able to get to a point where I could reboot myself. And a lot of this was also, they provided me with, the ability to really think about myself, what I had done in the past, the things that I'd done that were wrong, to tell you the truth, and who I wanted to be moving forward. And part of that was an evaluation of what I am good at and what I am not good at. And I went to Sean one day and I said, "I don't think you're using me the right way." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "Look, I can do this content thing, I can do this creative thing till the cows come home. But that's not what I'm really good at." And he's like, "Okay." I said, "I'm really good at understanding people and understanding and being almost like an emotional empath to understand how people feel, what's going on. And I said, and I'm going to give you an example. And he's like, what? I said, Sean, you run these town halls like they are Baptist tent revivals. And by the way, they're fun, they're great, like there's so much energy. I said, but people don't believe you. I said, because you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. They need to hear the truth. You keep saying we're doing well, we're doing okay, but we're not doing great. And there are things that are going on where there's a little bit of a hiring freeze, promotions are being held back, and that is totally in conflict from what you are telling them, like we're doing great. And I said, I understand that you want people to feel excited. I said, but people also want the truth. And I said, I said, I think I can help you change the way that you were communicating with people so that they're still excited, but there's enough transparency and truth to this that they don't feel that you're potentially delusional or you're not telling them everything. And I said, because people will fill in the gaps of what they don't know with what they believe, whether it's right or not. And I said, and that is what you're fighting right now. There's a lot of people talking about things that have nothing to do with what is actually going on.
So I just want to stop there for a second because you've said a lot of really interesting things that I think our listeners will benefit from. So the first thing I'm thinking that I'm hearing you say, and I know we don't all have the luxury of being able to resign without other work, but it doesn't have to take a resignation. It can take a pause where you need to pause and think about, okay, I need a change of scenery. Does that mean I need a vacation? Does that mean I want to talk to leadership and see if I can rotate, whether it's temporarily or permanently, into another department for a couple of months? Is there a way to doing a job swap with another city or another department? Finding that change of scenery is really important in keeping your career fresh because it's going to give you the pause. It's going to force you, whether you like it or not, to think differently and interact differently because you're not with your same cast of characters that you're working with on a regular basis. So that's the first thing that I'm hearing. The second
And
thing
and it gives
go
you
ahead.
the ability, more than anything, I think the thing that is a career killer, and yeah, and Jill, you know this because you and I've talked about this before. I call the three S's: safe, stretch, and suck. And those are the three components of every
Tell
job.
them more about your three S's because it's
So
great.
I believe that they're like a perfect job has an equal amount of safe, and safe being the things that you know and you're really good at. Stretch, which is you're learning, you're over your ski tips, you're a little scared, and it's pushing you forward. And there's something that no one tells you, which is there's going to be components of your job that suck that no one could ever take away.
Right, because it's work. It's not a
Because
hobby. There's always going to
it's
be
just
parts
life.
that
It's
suck.
just life, man.
Life.
And where people want is they want this job that it's all safe and stretch. And that is too ideal. That never exists. But where you get bored is where it is safe and suck and there's no stretch and you become complacent, you start repeating things. The worst other side is that it's all stretch and suck, which means that
Mhm.
you're scared out of your mind all the time because you're so over your ski tips and you're covering things that
You're
then
not able to, if you're thinking scared, we know this and our listeners know this. If you're only in the
reactive
fear, you cannot be using your prefrontal cortex to be strategic. You cannot be doing both at the same time.
and
So,
you're reactive through
and you're
everything.
reactive.
And you see
Absolutely.
people all the time at work. And how I have done this lens is like when people are reactive, I'm like, okay, what is going on? What is the motivation behind this? Why are they scared? Like, what is going on? I want to help understand this because I don't believe it's what's going on physically in the office. There's a lot of other things that contribute to it, but like understanding where people come from helps you also guide their careers. But like also being realistic with everyone about like, look,
Well, that goes to your second point with what you
you want to
said.
turn the dial enough that you've got enough safe, stretch, and suck throughout the day that it evens itself out, that you can leave and be like, okay, I accomplished some things. There's some things that like I didn't get done, but you know what? I still feel really good about what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I really looked, and I don't think a lot of people have the time to look and sit there and say, am I bored? Am I bored? Am I not growing? Is there not enough stretch in what I do? And this switching of things and change, whether you want to embrace it or not, forces stretch,
Yes.
no matter what.
Yes.
We like whether you're working out and you need to be more limber, whether it is, in your job, stretching is incredibly important
Yes.
because it gives you the ability to understand what you can do.
Yeah. And it's also that point of, I've said this before that in our education system, failure means the end. And in real life, especially within our career, failures and endings that suck, that stretch, that scaredness, that discomfort. It might not be the end, quote say, but it's actually the beginning. It's actually like, oh, there's something rich here for me to lean into, for me to decide, am I going to learn this? Am I going to delegate this? Am I going to partner with someone who we're going to collaborate and do it together? But forces that it forces us to take different actions. So what I'm hearing from you is change of scenery, and it can take different ways to get there. The three S's, which of course is a sidebar, but it's a philosophy that I think everyone should really think about. What is the right balance and the right tolerance for you to have that safeness, to have the stretch, and to know that some of it's going to suck because that's what it is.
But
And then
also be
lastly,
super
what you
clear on your
pushed on.
boundaries. Be super clear on your boundaries also. Suck can take over your life if you have no boundaries.
Yes. What are your non-negotiables?
But
What do you
also
need?
boundaries, but also vulnerability. I have found more comfort later in my career in being vulnerable in saying, I'm scared of this to someone who's my supervisor. This makes me scared. And I'll tell you why this makes me scared. Um, when I was being promoted into my current role of being a global client lead on a piece of business at Publicis, the day before it was to be announced, I went to Lauren Henrian, who's the CEO of Zenith in the US, and I said, I think you're making a terrible mistake. It was one of my few crises of consciousness. I'm like, I have confidence to tell you the truth. And she said, why? And I said, look, this has been the biggest win that we've had in 20 years. I'm not sure I'm the right person. And she's like, we don't feel that way, but you need to go talk to Dave. And it's Dave Penske. And I went, and she's like, you need to go upstairs. And so I went up to his office. It's like, look, don't send the email out. I think we're making a big mistake. And he's like, we're not. And I'm like, but I think you are. He's like, but we're not. And the
But we're
email's
not.
going out. The email's going out. And I need you to take a deep breath because we believe in you and we're not going to let you fail.
Awesome. Awesome. And
And
that's the part which you said, with the win to transfer jobs, which was the change of scenery, you had a very honest conversation with your leadership. And you talked about how you felt and you treated them like a human versus somebody who's in a different stratosphere that you couldn't necessarily talk to. You talked to them respectfully as a human and was sharing what you were looking for, but also asking questions. You also pushed on the transparency, both with that other CEO. And then, of course, in the win that you just mentioned, right? Going to two leaders and saying, here are my thoughts, here are my fears, and getting a real clear, transparent conversation. Again, I understand that not everyone in all circumstances is going to be able to have this level of transparency. But if you think through what are the points you want to make and what are the questions you want to ask and get really neutral on them, meaning if you're coming at them with passion or anger, no one's going to be able to hear you.
oh,
But when you're able to neutralize them and clearly say, here's what I'm thinking, what are your thoughts? That level of transparency is also what is going to grow your career. I think those points are great, Brent, and people will really benefit from hearing those things. Thank you for that.
well, look, I will tell you, I am, again, my superpowers come from, I think your superpowers are really rooted in many cases in the way that you grew up. My ability to read a room emotionally, to understand people, their motivations, etc., comes from the fact that I had an older brother who had mental illness. And and also grew up in a family with alcoholism. And so, like, look, when you aren't sure how someone's going to react to something, you have to read the room very quickly because you're afraid of what the outcome is going to be. I didn't know that at that point in time that like and people used to say this to me all the time, and I think you've even said this to me at different points. It's like, how do you get to know these people so well? Like, how do they open up to you? Like it's bizarre how you can like go deep with somebody. And a lot of it is just like getting to know people very well, but also understanding the it's the little language that lays underneath between like body language, shifting their seats and things like that, the uncomfortableness and like making sure that people are okay. And I think my openness is always in being very vulnerable in some ways, or very transparent. It works for me because that's kind of like who I am. And I think that in some cases, they don't recommend it to a ton of people unless it's really authentic to who you are. Or you need to get to a place where there's a major breakthrough and that vulnerability is like going to be
Well,
something
I
that,
think what it is actually, because I've worked with you for so many years, is that it's the situations you're sharing are facts. You're not still in the story. You're able to say there was mental health in my family. There were challenges around substance misuse in my family. If you're still in the story, then the conversation becomes about you and your story. And in a professional environment, we're all getting dragged through that. When you're able to say it with a confidence where you've done your healing and you're coming from a place of centeredness and you're just stating it as like, here's the reality, this is my makeup, you have this amazing gift, and I've told you this before, where you're able to, whether you say it or whether people just feel it, people are able to know that you see them, you hear them, you get them, and you can help them. And I will tell you, I think as a leader, there's no greater gift to be able to give to either peers or your executive leadership or the people that report to you than to really see them, get them, know them. And then when I say help them, it might be with the challenge in front of them, or it might be part of their career. And you've always been a champion of helping people move through the corporate matrixed environment.
I actually love this phase of my career um, more than any other part of my career because I've realized it's not about me anymore. And there are
Mm,
phases that happen in your career that no one really talks to you about, but they're just facts. The beginning, when you start, it's about learning as much as you can. You are a sponge, taking in everything. But then there is this moment where you've got to start making decisions about like where you're going, which track you're on, et cetera. And it's incredibly unnerving. And certainly I talked to a bunch of our younger employees who are afraid of making decisions. They're like, oh my God, what if this is the wrong decision? I'm just like, you are 23. There is not much that you can do right now that is going to ruin your career. Um, you've got to go on a journey and be open and say yes and learn as much as you can to form the opinions about like where you want to go. And some people are very clear and they know where they want to go, and some people want to experiment more. I tended to be a little bit more experimental in the middle because I, again, a journalist, would see things that it was like a magpie, bright, shiny objects. I want to go do that. I want to go do that. I want to do that. But I was also was afraid of being bored. And now at this in the middle of the career is about you. It's like you, all the things like you're going to do, getting to the next thing. And frankly, I didn't really love that part
mm,
because um, it's scary about whether you're making the right decisions or not. And it's scary, especially if you're not sure that you really know who you are, what benefits you're bringing to a company. And then when you're a little bit more settled, and I found this place that is more at ease for myself, I've realized that the tail end of my career is not about me at all. It's about what I can do for other people.
mm.
I'm supposed to be here to set up everyone else for their thing. My time is coming to an end, and that's okay. And I don't mean like, 57 is over for me, but like,
Right. No, it's not.
I'm not like, I'm not going to be like, I'm not going to be at the top of somebody's list, for like, you're going to do this or that. But I am so settled in the fact that I've learned a ton. I'm comfortable with my journey, and I'm more comfortable with myself and what I can do for other people.
Mm,
And taking that pressure off of it's about me and what's next and the next thing that's going to happen for me has been a real piece of peace that I didn't know that I wanted.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. It's really beautiful. So a couple of rapid fire questions. How do you keep your mindset fresh? How do you like what's some of the routines that you do so that you're able to continue to create value pretty much every day?
First of all, I'm a firm believer in getting up and doing something to clear your mind. I think a cluttered mind to start a day is a potentially dangerous mind. Um, and I think this being some form of physicality, and it's the way that
Mhm.
I burn off my energy, to tell you the truth. And look, I'm up at 5 a.m. I've got the dogs. I have 3 dogs that come to the office with me every day. And we go for, a hike. We live in Pasadena. We hike up, to the base of the San Gabriel Mountains and back. I work out, I get here, and I find peace and time, quiet early in the morning, being in the office, where I can get things done. And frankly, look, a routine I think is great. I think it's great to keep structure because I think a lack of structure makes people feel far more uncomfortable than anything else. And if you can find comfort in that, and also things that are important to you, I think the mornings for me, and I say this to a lot of people, even though I work in a global job, which is you've got to give me time in the morning to do something for me because the rest of the day is going to be
It's gonna be yours. Yeah.
about is yours. And so I need to focus on me. If I can get that done and I can get into the office, it means that your mind's clear, you're settled, you're calm, and then you know that there's going to be a burning trash can somewhere in the world that you're going to have to deal with. And you just go at it. And instead of it being, I, I, in my current role, I took it very personally at the beginning of running this business that there were problems every day. And I thought that I could get this place to like, I'm going to solve all these problems. It's like, don't be so arrogant, Brent. You're never going to solve all these problems. Problems are part of life in general. There are going to be things that go on. I try to be someone who is there to help people figure out how to get over whatever hurdle it is. And the other thing is, I think also with clients or anybody, the idea that you're going to fail people is just inherent.
Yeah.
And I have learned to say I'm sorry a lot
And bounce back from it. Yeah.
and sit there and say, look, I failed here. I'm sorry. But I've also found that if you apologize genuinely, that most people will forgive very, very quickly and move
Yes.
on. But it's when you dig into things and you're like, no, I'm afraid of being wrong. I'm afraid of like this. I'm gonna like try to wash this clean before I get it to you. People see through the facade of that and it doesn't feel genuine. And if when you can tell people I was wrong and I get it, it is amazing how much forgiveness people will give back and move on.
Brent, this has been such a treat. I really appreciate you taking the time and talking to people and just really just having an open conversation and sharing a bit about your journey. There are so many gems here that I know people are really going to listen to and take note of. If you have questions, I want you to email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. We will get those questions to Brent. And as you know, I always say, we'll bring him back and we will have him answer those questions because I know as he's smiling at me, he will do this.
Well, I answered them very honestly. So
It'll be good. Or maybe we'll do a LinkedIn Live together and we can answer the questions that way. So I appreciate everyone for listening, and all of Brent's information and where you can follow him on the socials will be in the show notes. And until next time, I thank you all for being here.
thank you for having me.
I'm Jill Griffin, your host of the Career Refresh podcast. My mission is to make workplaces more successful for everyone. So if you have ideas for topics or future guests, please email us at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. Until next time, embrace possibility, be generous, intentional, and kind.